Flash Season 9 has come and gone a long time ago now, and this is a video that is definitely a little bit outdated because, well, this interview that I'm doing this video on is from a while ago, but it's still a video that I wanted to make and I've wanted to make for a while, as I just feel like it's an interesting look ahead into what could have been the Flash Season 10 if it were to get that 10th season. And what I'm talking about here is there is a particular interview with the Flash showrunner Eric Wallace where he spoke about ideas of what he was thinking about for the Flash Season 10 and what the show would have been had it reached that 10th season. Obviously this is my first Arrowverse video in a little while. I do want to say thank you to those who have been watching my more recent videos where I've been focusing on other comic book media. I think that those videos have done really well, and I want to thank you all so much for watching them and liking them. Just shows me that you guys are enjoying that type of content, and that's the sort of stuff that I'll be doing going forward. But I kind of wanted to go back to this just because it's a video I wanted to make for a while, and I thought it'd be interesting and, you know, be fun to go back to, given the fact that this is how this all started, was Arrowverse. So let's kind of go back to it for a little bit. So yeah, in this video I'm going to be talking about what Eric Wallace said in this interview about what the Flash Season 10 could have been and what the potential storylines would have been that we might have seen. So kicking off, I will start off with something actually from Season 9 actually that was going to be in Season 9, and that was a Legends of Tomorrow wrap-up. Now of course we all know that Legends of Tomorrow was unfortunately cancelled after its 7th season, ended on a horrific cliffhanger where the Legends were arrested for time crimes, and there was also the introduction of Booster Gold, and this was unfortunately never resolved, and you know, we never got any more information on that due to the show being cancelled. So Eric Wallace did say that originally in Season 9, for his plans for Season 9, there would have been a 2-parter episode which would have focused on wrapping up the story of Legends of Tomorrow. And this, I think, given the fact that obviously Legends was cancelled, this would have been a lovely little inclusion just for the fans of Legends who, like me and like many of you watching, have been watching the show since Season 1. And especially given the fact that the show did end on a cliffhanger, I think it would have been really nice just to have that kind of final episode to kind of tie up all the stories and all the characters, especially with it being an ensemble show. It just would have been really nice to kind of have that all wrapped up together. It does say that, you know, this particular 2-parter episode would have been a proper goodbye to the series and a proper goodbye to the characters, and also would have featured Booster Gold, played by Donald Faison, who of course was introduced in that finale and would have been presumably a big part of Legends of Tomorrow Season 8. But the reason why that this never happened is because the Flash Season 9, its episode count got reduced, and it was only 13 episodes, as we know, compared to what the Flash normally had, which was 22 to 23 episodes per season. And essentially because of the reduced episode count, Eric Wallace felt like he wasn't able to include that while also doing a satisfying wrap-up to the Flash itself, which, you know, is an understandable reason. Like, at the end of the day, you've got to put the show that you're working on first. You've got to put that first, especially if it's the final season, which in this case obviously it was. You know, you don't really want to be focusing on wrapping up the stories of other people's shows, but at the same time it would have been really nice to get it. But I think as far as reasons as to why it didn't happen, like, I think you can you know, you can understand, you can sympathize why Eric Wallace didn't go ahead with this plan, just because he had only limited time to tell the story he needed to tell and wrap up the story of the Flash, you know, a whole 9-season show. Eric Wallace also spoke about a Despero crossover, which, if you remember, Despero was the main villain of the Flash Season 8 Armageddon crossover, and if you do recall back to that crossover, the character of Despero wasn't actually defeated. He never was taken down. He actually escaped at the end. And he did kind of give this warning to the Flash that he would be back. And this particular crossover that Eric talks about would have been the follow-up to this. This would have been what he describes as a full-on invasion, where Despero would have returned to Earth and would have brought many of his alien companions with him, and thus launched a full-scale alien invasion on Earth. And this would have caused a reaction from the entirety of the Justice League. And I think that this sounds really great, because one thing that the Arrowverse unfortunately never really got to do was its own version of the Justice League. We kind of had it, and we got it right at the very end of Crisis on Infinite Earths, but after Crisis, that's kind of when the Arrowverse started to go on its very quick decline, and we never really got a full-scale Arrowverse Justice League crossover, and that's kind of what this would have been. It would have featured characters like Tyler Hoechlin's Superman, Melissa Benoist's Supergirl, would have featured Martian Manhunter, White Canary, I'm presuming Ryan Wilder's Batwoman, who would have been introduced to the larger universe here, and Black Lightning. They all would have been here teaming up with the Flash to take on this alien threat, and I think this would have been cool. Like, Despero was a cool villain back in the Armageddon crossover. It would have been nice to get it followed up on properly, but this was just one of those things that they never got around to. But I think that this would have been cool, especially because I think Despero, his alien design was pretty cool. I personally quite liked it. I thought the CGI worked quite well for him. So seeing like his other friends and what they could have looked like would have been nice. And also just the idea of having like a full-scale Justice League crossover where, you know, I'm sure the heroes would have started and met in the Hall of Justice and, you know, re-teamed up and then going out to do this big fight. It sounds great. Like, obviously, just as a DC fan, that sounds fantastic. So I would have loved to have seen this, but unfortunately, with the powers that be, we never got this one. And another one that they spoke about in the interview was Blackest Night, which, if you are unfamiliar with the comics, Blackest Night is a miniseries from 2009, which involves the story of the Green Lanterns. And this was something that was starting to be established in The Flash back in Season 8. Back in Season 8, the Blackest Night storyline was set up with the character of Deathstorm. Wallace says, when Deathstorm was defeated, the emotional vibrations went all the way back to the Netherverse and another dimension to Nekron, who's right out of the comic books. I wanted to have one final big, huge crossover, getting everybody, if you're on a show or not, back together for that storyline. What that would have allowed me to do is bring back characters that are dead. Wallace intended on bringing characters together from The Flash, Superman and Lois, as well as Titans and DC's Stargirl. The idea was to get them all together to stop Nekron and all of his Black Lanterns, while I'm sure Jeff Johns would have loved it because it's his creation. Now, Blackest Night, as mentioned there, is a story that is mainly about Green Lantern. It's a Green Lantern storyline, but what this would have meant for the Arrowverse is they could have brought back a lot of dead characters, because Blackest Night is kind of a grim storyline. It involves kind of these kind of zombified versions of DC characters coming back as the Black Lanterns, and this meant for Eric Wallace that characters from the Arrowverse, be it alive or not, whether they're still on the show or not, could come back in this kind of zombified form, which does make you think back to, you know, certain characters, like who could they bring back? Like, I think the first one that obviously everyone kind of jumps to mind in this case would have been like Oliver Queen. Could Stephen Amell have come back for this crossover as a kind of zombified version of Ollie? And there's many characters like that who, you know, could have come back for this crossover. And I also think the other big thing about this is that this would have fully resolved the John Diggle Green Lantern storyline. Obviously, Diggle at the end of the Arrow Season 8 finale, he got the Green Lantern ring, and there was this kind of storyline that was going on for a while about, you know, was he going to accept the ring? Was he going to become a Green Lantern? Was he not? And it kind of never got fully resolved up until The Flash Season 8 when he rejected the ring. And it was said at the time that the reason why he rejected the ring was because they realized that they weren't going to be able to fully wrap up the storyline, so they kind of just had him reject it rather than accept it. But I think that had they gone forward with this and the Blackest Night storyline would have come into fruition, we would have seen David Ramsey accept that Green Lantern ring and become the Arrowverse's version of Green Lantern, which would have been absolutely sick. Like, that would have been awesome to see, especially because it really felt like that's what they were building towards. And I remember back in Season 8 of The Flash, when he rejected the ring, it felt a bit abrupt, it felt a bit weird, but it was because they knew that they couldn't really do it. But if they could have done it and we would have seen it, it would have been a great little end to that arc and a great little moment for fans who, for years throughout Arrow, wanted David Ramsey to take up that mantle. And I think that this would have been such a perfect little way to do it. And Blackest Night is such a huge DC story. To see the Arrowverse adapt it like they did with Crisis on Infinite Earths or Elseworlds, I think it just would have been an excellent thing for fans to see. And the final thing to talk about is Eric Wallace spoke about the Forever War. Now, the Forever War is another thing that has been teased in The Flash for a little while. This is a completely original idea. This isn't actually a storyline from the comics, but the Forever War basically would have focused on the character of the Chronarch, who, if you recall, the Chronarch was teased in The Flash Season 8 and also in The Flash Season 7. He's this kind of like big cosmic villain that was kind of teased in the background, but we never really saw. And this would have focused on him. So Eric Wallace says, that's one of the crazy things that I've been hinting at, which is very tied in with the Chronarch. referring to the rulers of the 64th century. We've been hinting that the Chronarch would be back in some way as early as Season 7, when Abracadabra, played by David Dastmalchian, mentions to Barry, the Chronarch is coming and is going to mess up your life. It has to do with Barry and Iris becoming eternity... Sorry, it has to do with Barry and Iris because eternity is falling apart and forever is getting taken away. That would have kicked off Season 10 with a couple of special guest stars that we would have seen. So this would have been a kind of big opening to the season. It sounds like that this particular like Forever War storyline wouldn't have been as like crossover heavy as something like Blackest Night or even like Armageddon. This would have been primarily focusing on Barry and Iris, but it does say that there would have been a couple of guest stars. So I'm guessing that we would have seen, you know, some characters from the Justice League help Barry and team up, you know, similarly to what we saw with like the Atom in Armageddon or maybe Black Lightning in Armageddon, like just kind of like these characters who are a part of the Justice League and a part of all that, just helping Barry to take on this threat. And I think this would have been great to see because it sounds like, you know, the stakes were pretty high. It's dealing with time travel in the future, which is something that the show kind of moved away from in its later years. And also, you know, it was something that was set up for a while. Like, as Eric says, all the way back in Season 7, they were teasing Chronarch. So for them to finally pay that off would have been really fun. So, you know, I really like the idea of the Forever War. It sounds really cool. I would have loved to have seen it. And just to finally pay off that whole Chronarch villain tease would have been a nice end. So all these storylines that were teased here do sound really awesome. Like, I really like the sound of all of them. In terms of like which one I would have liked to have seen the most, like I think naturally, you know, my top choice for this, you know, if I could pick one, would be Blackest Night. And that's mainly because it would act as a conclusion to Diggle's story, but also the fact that Blackest Night is such a big, cool DC storyline from the comics. I would have loved to have seen them adapt that, because I feel like Blackest Night is one of those storylines that maybe we'll get to it in a movie one day. Like maybe James Gunn is planning on doing it for his Lanterns TV show. Like that would be really cool. But I feel like given the fact that the Arrowverse was like this established universe that had years of characters that were both dead and alive that they could have brought in for this, it just lended itself so well to it. And again, just bring it back to Diggle. Like, you guys know how much Arrow means to me. It's my favourite show ever. So to kind of finally pay off that Diggle storyline that they had been teasing for a year or so by that point, just would have been like the little cherry on top. So yeah, I think out of all of them, if I could have seen any of them, I would have gone with Blackest Night. But to be fair, I do love the sound of the Forever War. Like, I think that sounds really cool. The Despero invasion being like this full-scale Justice League crossover would have been cool. And even like the Legends wrap-up, like that just would have been really nice to kind of finally get that conclusion to those characters. But overall, if I had to pick one, I'd go with Blackest Night. Make sure you let me know in the comments, which one would you like to have seen and what would you be your predictions for it? Make sure you let me know in the comments below. But thank you guys for checking out this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Like I say, it's a little bit of a different one. I kind of went back to the Arrowverse stuff just for this one, just to see, you know, what you guys think about these potential ideas for Season 10. And kind of go back to the old style where I'm just on the mic for it. But if you guys want to see more content from me, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, and give it a like, just so I can see that you guys are enjoying this content. And also make sure you let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of these plans for Season 10? Which crossover were you looking forward to the most? And what were your plans for it? What were your predictions for it? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments down below. And I hope to see you guys again in my next video.